If I asked you who runs the world, you would probably point to a map. You would talk about superpowers. You would mention the United States, China, or the European Union. You would talk about presidents, prime ministers, and standing armies. But that map is outdated. It is a comfortable lie we tell ourselves to feel safe. In 2024, the market capitalization of Apple surpassed the entire GDP of France. Microsoft is now worth more than the economic output of Brazil, Canada, and Russia combined. But this isn't just about money. It is about power. Imagine an entity that knows exactly where you sleep, who you talk to, and what you buy. An entity that can freeze your bank account, lock your digital doors, and silence your voice with a single line of code. They don't have a standing army. They don't have borders. They don't need them. We used to call them companies. Now they are the new superpowers. History tells us that when corporations become stronger than the state, democracy doesn't just fade, it gets privatized. We are witnessing the birth of a new era. Economists are calling it Techno-Feudalism. It is a world where you own nothing, and you pay rent for your digital existence. And the scariest part, you have already signed the terms and conditions. Welcome to the age of the uncrowned kings. For the last 400 years, the nation-state was the ultimate authority on earth. Governments made laws, minted currency, and held the monopoly on violence. Corporations were just guests in their house. They operated under the law. But that dynamic has flipped. Today, we see the emergence of megacorporations that operate above the laws of any single nation. They hold cash reserves larger than most central banks. They preside over digital territories with billions of users' populations larger than Christianity or Islam. This isn't capitalism as Adam Smith described it. In a free market, competition drives prices down. In this new reality, competition is eliminated and power is consolidated. This is a return to a much older, darker system. To understand where Amazon, Google, and Meta are going, we cannot just look at stock charts. We have to look back at the most dangerous corporation in human history. We have to look at the moment when a board of directors decided they didn't just want to trade with a country, they wanted to own it. Let's rewind. The year is 1600. A group of merchants in London gathers to form a startup. They call it the Governor and Company of Merchants of London Trading into the East Indies. Or, as history remembers it, the British East India Company. At first, it was harmless. They just wanted to import spices, tea, and silk. They were the tech giants of their day, using cutting-edge navigation technology to connect the world. But they realized something very quickly. Trading is hard. Competition is expensive, but ruling is profitable. Over the next century, the company transformed. They stopped being just merchants and became a sovereign power. They began to mint their own currency. They established their own courts. And, most terrifying of all, they built their own private army. By 1803, this company had a private army of 260,000 soldiers. That was twice the size of the British Royal Army. Think about that for a second. Imagine if Amazon had a military force twice the size of the U.S. Marines. Now, that is the scale of power we are talking about. The turning point came in 1757 at the Battle of Plassey. The company's forces defeated the Nawab of Bengal. A CEO didn't just fire a competitor, he conquered a nation. Suddenly, a corporation was responsible for collecting taxes from millions of people. They decided who starved and who ate during famines. They weren't answerable to the people of India, and they were barely answerable to the politicians in London. They were a corporate state, driven purely by the maximization of shareholder profit with zero moral obligation to human life. It was a system of absolute extraction. It ended only when the company became so toxic, so powerful, and so corrupt that the British government had to forcibly nationalize it in 1858. But it took 250 years to stop them. Now, fast forward to today. We don't see private armies of redcoats. We don't see cannons. But the mechanics of control are exactly the same. The East India Company controlled the physical routes of trade, the ports, the ships, the roads. If you wanted to move goods, you paid the company. Today's tech giants control the digital routes of trade, the App Store, the search engine, the cloud server. If you want to move information or money, you pay the company. History is rhyming. The uniforms have changed, but the empire remains. How does a company become a country? It doesn't happen overnight. Through analyzing history and current economics, we can see a clear pattern. A 5-stage cycle that takes a business from a service provider to a sovereign ruler. The corporation offers a service so good, so cheap, or so innovative that it becomes essential. Google search, Amazon Prime, the iPhone. We invite them into our lives because they make things easier. We tear down the barriers because the product is irresistible. This is the critical shift. They stop selling just the product and start owning the road. Amazon isn't just a store anymore. Through AgeOS, it owns the servers that run half the internet. Apple isn't just a phone maker. It controls the App Store, the only door to reach 1 billion wealthy customers. They become the toll booth collectors of the global economy. At this stage, the company becomes too big to regulate. Their lobbyists write the laws. If fines are just operating costs. When a company makes $100 billion a year, $2 billion Australian dollars fine for breaking privacy laws isn't a punishment, it's a parking ticket. The law ceases to apply to them in the same way it applies to you. This is where we are right now. The corporation begins to challenge the government's monopoly on power. They create their own currencies. Think of Facebook's Libra project or the integration of crypto. They censor speech that the government cannot. They negotiate with foreign nations directly. They are no longer asking for permission. The corporation becomes the governance structure. You rely on them for your ID, your money, your safety, and your information. The government is just a legacy institution, a hollow shell that maintains the roads while the corporation maintains the reality. The East India Company reached stage 5, and right now, big tech is knocking on the door. Let's apply this to the concept of techno-feudalism. In the Middle Ages, feudalism was simple. The lord owned the land. The serf worked the land. The serf kept some crops to survive, but gave the rest to the lord in exchange for protection. You couldn't leave the land because outside the walls, you would die. Today, we are the digital serfs. Apple and Google own the land. It's called the ecosystem. You work on their land. You create content, you generate data, you engage with ads. In exchange, they give you free tools, maps, email, social media, but the rent you pay is your data, your attention, and a 30% tax on every transaction you make. This is not a free market. In a free market, if you don't like a store, you walk across the street. But under techno-feudalism, there is no across the street. If you leave the Google or Apple ecosystem, you lose your contacts, your photos, your business tools, and your digital identity. The cost of leaving is too high. Consider the sheer scale of their war chests. Apple sits on nearly $160 billion in cash and marketable securities. That is more liquid cash than the United States Treasury holds on most operating days. When a company has more financial firepower than the government that is supposed to regulate it, who is really in charge? We saw a terrifying glimpse of this power in 2021. The Australian government tried to pass a law forcing Facebook and Google to pay news outlets for content. It was a standard legislative process of a sovereign nation. Facebook didn't hire lawyers to argue the case. They didn't lobby. They simply reached for the kill switch. Overnight, Facebook unfriended Australia. They blocked all news content on the platform for the entire continent. But they didn't stop there. The algorithm also blocked pages for fire departments, emergency services, and health organizations during a pandemic and bushfire season. It was a flex. It was a demonstration of brute force. Facebook was saying to a G20 nation, "Nice country you have there. Shame if someone disconnected it." And you know what happened? Decay. The government blinked. They watered down the law. The corporation won. So, what happens next? If this pattern continues, we are heading toward a crisis of sovereignty. We are moving toward a world where your citizenship matters less than your subscription. Being a citizen of a country gives you rights protected by a constitution. You have due process. You have a vote. But being a user of a platform gives you privileges granted by a user agreement. Rights can be defended in court. User agreements can be changed at any time for any reason, with no appeal. As governments continue to drown in debt and bureaucracy, these corporate empires will step in to fill the void. We may see the rise of corporate cities' special economic zones where Amazon or Tesla provides the police, the fire department, the schools, and the housing. It sounds efficient. It sounds clean. But there is a catch. Democracies, for all their flaws, are designed to protect the weak. They are inefficient because they require consensus. Corporations are dictatorships. They are efficient because they require obedience. If we allow the transition to techno-feudalism to complete, we trade our freedom for convenience. We trade our status as citizens for the status of users. And remember, users can be deleted. When the East India Company became too powerful, it didn't just maximize profits. It caused the Great Bengal Famine of 1770, where millions died because the company refused to lower taxes or distribute food, claiming it would hurt the bottom line. Algorithms today are designed with the same logic. They don't care about social cohesion. They don't care about mental health. They care about engagement and retention. If an algorithm decides that outrage and division make more money than peace and truth, it will choose outrage every single time. The East India Company eventually fell. But it didn't fall because of market forces. It fell because the people and the state finally realized that a merchant should never wear a crown. We are at that crossroads again. The uncrowned kings of Silicon Valley have built a world that is efficient, shiny, and incredibly convenient. But the price of admission is your autonomy. We need to recognize these entities for what they are. They are not just building phones or search engines. They are building the operating system for human civilization. And right now, they hold the admin passwords. The next time you click "I agree," ask yourself a simple question. Are you signing a contract? Or are you pledging allegiance to a new empire? History doesn't always repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And right now, the rhythm is getting faster. If you want to understand the economic forces that are shaping this new reality and how to protect your own sovereignty in a digital age, make sure you subscribe to Economy Rewind. We don't just tell you what happened, we tell you what's coming next. I'll see you in the next one.